Marine science, exploration, salvage, facility inspection, and maintenance are examples of civil usage. In addition, submarines can be modified to perform specialized tasks like search and rescue operations and the maintenance of underwater cables. They're also employed in underwater archaeology and tourism. So what is the shocking submarine disaster caused by a joke? Welcome back to Military Knowledge. Less than 10 years after the terrible loss of the Kursk submarine in the Barents Sea, the Russians were engulfed by a devastating maritime disaster in November of 2008. When something unexpected went wrong, the crew of the Akula-class attack submarine K-142 NERPA was performing routine tests in the Pacific Ocean with a mixture of military and civilian personnel. The fire control system was turned on and 2 forward compartments were sealed at 8:30 p.m. While others attempted to make sense of the situation, a number of crew members were now trapped inside with a decreasing supply of oxygen and were unable to escape. Strangely, there was no fire to extinguish. The Russian Akula-class submarine NERPA K-152 was erected in 1993 at the Komsomolsk-on-Amur shipyard of the Amur shipbuilding plant. The Baikal Seal-inspired 8,140-ton nuclear-powered attack submarine belonged to the Soviet Project 971 class of 4th-generation submarines. However, because of the terrible economic climate of the disintegrating country in the early 1990s, she wasn't finished for nearly 10 years. There have reportedly been concerns raised regarding the metal used to construct the nuclear submarine, according to an unidentified shipyard worker. A chunk of metal, according to the unnamed source, was imported from China. He also stated that, when the first trials of the submarine were carried out, water was leaking in between the seams, so it's not surprising that the work dragged on. The unfinished vessel was eventually put on hold until the early 2000s. The Federal Agency for Industry, Rosprom, received interest in the submarine from the Indian Navy, and a deal was made for Rosprom to complete the vessel and lease it to India. The resumption of construction, it should be noted, was allegedly supported by Indian funding, and NERPA agreed to serve in the Indian Navy for 10 years in exchange. Even still, the vessel's quality received harsh criticism from a number of commentators, since it fell short of expectations. For starters, Alexander Goltz, the defense editor of the Yezhednevny Zernal newspaper, observed that the Amur shipyard supplied submarines in the 1980s, one after another, like pancakes. The facility produced a single vessel between 1993 and 2008. The lone, unimpressive submarine would eventually pay a terrible price, as it turned out in the end. No later than 2007, it was anticipated that the submarine would be finished. Sadly, that didn't occur. In order to be outfitted, NERPA was moved from the Vostok shipyard in the abandoned Primorsky Krai city of Bolshoi, Cayman. Finally, in late 2008, the submarine was released after 15 years of arduous development. The ship would need to pass sea testing and be given to the Russian Defense Ministry before it could be delivered to the Indian Navy. The leasing of NERPA and another submarine was part of a $2 billion contract between Russia and the Indian government, but the transaction would be abruptly delayed. As part of India's vital nuclear submarine program known as the Arihant class, Indian naval crews have been trained to operate the Russian vessel. While another group of sailors would arrive in the Vladivostok in late 2008 to conduct sea trials, some had received training close to St. Petersburg. NERPA was undergoing sea testing in November at the test facility for the Russian Pacific Fleet in the Petersburg Great Gulf by the Sea of Japan. The ship was not yet in service with the Russian Navy. Instead, it was undergoing plant testing under the watchful eye of an Amur shipyard team. In addition to the 81 military personnel who boarded the submarine that day for the trial, 127 civilian engineers from various shipyards who were involved in the construction or outfitting of the submarine also participated in the exercise. This meant that the crew's complement was significantly larger than that of a regular crew. On November 8th, NERPA began its first underwater test run, but something went awry around 8:30 p.m. The security system sealed off 2 forward compartments and activated the ship's fire suppression system, filling them with toxic material. A number of seamen were now stranded with no escape route. If you hit that subscribe button, you'll get all the knowledge that we have about submarines. Submarines have long faced the continual threat of fire. Russian submarines had the LOKH stations, or volumetric chemical fire suppression systems, in each compartment. If necessary, the same compartment or those next to it could be exposed to the fire extinguishing gas. Dibromotetrafluoroethane, also known as Freon R114B2 gas or Kladon in Russian, was a common material used as a haloalkyne refrigerant by the nation's navy. As soon as the gas was introduced into a specific compartment, it swiftly replaced oxygen, preventing chemical combustion. As a result, the enclosed rooms would be filled with the non-flammable gas, putting out the fire and preventing it from spreading throughout the ship. High doses of R114B2 can lead to narcosis, which eventually results in disorientation and fatigue. However, in rare instances, it can lead to asphyxiation. Unfortunately, the crew of the NERPA were entirely unprepared. 3 members of the military and 17 members of the general public perished in the tragedy before the warning sirens could even ring. In addition, at least 41 people suffered injuries, including several Amursky Shipbuilding Company employees. Due to the gas's freezing effect, many of them had frostbite. The Udaloy-class destroyer Admiral Tribut and rescue ship Seini sped from the closest city, Vladivostok, to the disaster area as soon as it happened to save the injured crew. The injured sailors were quickly transported to the destroyer and given the necessary medical attention there. The unharmed submarine eventually made her way back to Primorsky Krai on her own. The cause of the fire control system's activation, however, remained a mystery. The shocking announcement stunned Vladivostok residents, and the incident was dubbed the most horrifying submarine accident since the Kursk sank in 2000. The LOKH suppression system, whose newer version had not yet been tested on any Russian submarines, was first blamed for the tragedy. The new system could operate automatically in reaction to smoke and temperature rises in the environment, unlike earlier models that could only be operated manually from the duty shift panel. An engineer from the ZVEZDA shipyard corroborated that the rumors were not untrue when he said that the system had previously broken down while NERPA was getting ready for sea testing. In fact, a lot of analysts believe that a malfunctioning piece of equipment could have mistakenly turned on the system. The Russian Navy openly attributed the accident on November 10th to an unauthorized use of the fire suppression system, asserting that the mechanism had been activated without any human involvement. However, a few days later, the reality was revealed. A deeper investigation by the naval investigators revealed that a crewman had activated the system without permission or any particular grounds. Unofficially known as Dmitry Grobov, the seaman began fiddling with the system because he thought the local control unit was disconnected. A 5-digit access code would typically be used to safeguard the local control units. For the sea trials, the access combinations were, however, handwritten on the devices. The crew member boosted the temperature measurements from 30 degrees Celsius to 78 degrees Celsius as a result, leading the computer to think that there was a fire on board and initiating the otherwise appropriate process. The control unit asked for permission to start the fire suppression system when Grobov tampered with it, and he gave it. Whether or not Grobov knew what he was doing, he was charged and could have spent up to 7 years in prison. However, the sailor was found not guilty in 2011 and was later found not guilty by a jury. The Supreme Court's military board overturned the decision in 2012, and a retrial in the spring of 2013 confirmed the ruling. Nevertheless, despite Grobov's experience and reputation as a capable crewman, several colleagues questioned his guilt. Additionally, a number of retired naval officers who preferred to remain anonymous told the Kommersant newspaper that it was unlikely that the seaman was the only offender. They claimed that since the system required numerous levels of confirmation, no single person could activate it. The fact that there were numerous civilians aboard the submarine at the time of the disaster, however, also contributed to the tragic conclusion. Former Captain IGOR KURDIN remarked that civilian observers would be very unprepared to handle situations. It was informed that the release of the firefighting chemical had to be preceded by a special light and sound signal that warned the crew, following which they had to put on oxygen masks that would provide them with 30 minutes of breathing space while the compartments vented. Furthermore, many passengers were likely asleep and unable to put on the emergency equipment. Later reports confirmed this, stating that some of the victims were unable to activate their breathing apparatus before succumbing to their injuries. Even still, while such unintentional releases are not unusual in the Russian Navy, they rarely result in fatalities, and the irony of a safety mechanism harming the very personnel it's supposed to protect was not lost on the authorities. So what do you think about this video? Do comment down below. Also, if you love our content, do support us by hitting that subscribe button and that like button. To get notifications about our upcoming videos, turn on that bell icon. Refer to other amazing videos on our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.